Hello everybody and welcome to He Said, She Shed. In today's video we're going to do our first ever woodshop tour. But before I get into that, just a quick disclaimer, I almost didn't post this video. So here's the story. There's a fair amount of time that went by between shooting and editing this video, and of course it's during editing that I discovered some lighting issues I'm not too crazy about, and actually there was some audio issues that happened as well. So I hope that you'll bear with the imperfections because I'm just going to run with it. Reason being, I really, just for me if nothing else, I wanted to capture this moment in the evolution of the space. So thanks in advance for putting up with a few technical difficulties. You might have to lean in and listen to the fuzzy muffled parts that are about midway through the video, but all in all, I think you'll enjoy the walkthrough. All right, so there's the setup. Let's join our regularly scheduled programming already in progress. Instead, what I wanted to accomplish today is just kind of a snapshot of where we are at this point in time, this level of evolution of the shop, so that we can look back in a few years and appreciate how much things have evolved, Lord willing. Along the way, I'll be hinting at some of the upcoming projects and episodes that are in the works here at He Said, She Shed. So let's begin with what's right here in the foreground, which is my table saw. I've got it placed in such a fashion that there's plenty of in-feed space and out-feed space that if for some crazy reason I thought of running full 4x8 sheets through the saw, I could do it. So at the moment, my out-feed support is limited to just this thing, but that brings us to one of those future projects. I would like to build an out-feed table that sits here that gives me some extra storage underneath and so forth. Haven't even thought about designing it yet or what all I want for features, but it's probably a thing that I'm going to want. Next on the list is this mobile station that I've got back here in the corner with my drill press and a couple of sanders on it. There was a complete video done on this workstation based on an old cable reel, but the lovely thing about it is that I can move it out away from the wall to be able to get at these less often tools when I need to. Haven't used the spindle sander too much yet, but when I need to, I can get at it with plenty of room around it. I do use the disc sander a lot, so sometimes instead of even just pulling the whole thing out, I ended up just twisting this a few degrees to do something briefly. To my right here, I've got the simplest of workbenches for my 6-inch benchtop jointer. As with most everything in my shop, this thing is on a mobile base in case I need to move it somewhere to give me more in-feed or out-feed space than what this current location affords. So next, let's pan the camera just a little bit this direction, and we'll continue. So the next stop on the tour is the router table. This is one of my favorite workstations in the shop. I built this thing about 15 years ago, and it was one of my first shop-built workbenches. I love everything about it. It served me well. You can see that I've made more use of that aluminum extrusion material, not only for the adjustability of the fence faces, for the forward and back adjustability, you can see it rides on more of that aluminum track up here. In terms of improvements and future projects, however, I do have an older router lift mechanism that I got for free that I'm just itching to put into this router table when time allows. So this thing has been in its current state as is, as I mentioned, for a good solid 15 years or maybe even more by now. So I'm pretty excited about making what's already a great workstation potentially even better. That's going to be a really great project when the time comes, but there's plenty of other things that are higher on my priority list. And that brings me to the next stop on the tour, which is dust collection. The heart of my dust collection system will sit here in this corner, and all the plumbing to all the tools in the room will extend from this location. You can see I've already begun to build the beginnings of the top hat and baffle assembly. So this project is well underway, but there's still a lot to do. The actual motor and blower system will sit up here with a flex hose that will extend down, and the fine dust that doesn't make it into the container below will actually just get vented outside. Of the few things that I've been able to build in the shop have been a lot of fun, but I'm really looking forward to not have to eat quite so much dust that has been the case to date. So this has been a priority whose time has come. So this is my current active project. So the next station here to my right, I've come to call my metals station. Now this particular cart has had a past life with a different purpose, but I've decided to rededicate it to all things metalwork related. So I've got a bench vise up here. I've got my bench grinder sitting right here. Now right now it's being held still by a big old woodworking vise, but that vise is actually going to get removed from this particular cart and put elsewhere. And I'll tell you about that project in the other corner of the room here in just a few minutes. But yeah, aside from the things that sit on top, in the storage down below, there's things like files and punches and my angle grinder and so forth. So yeah, kind of all things metals related happen over here. So next up is the thickness planer. It's not something I really use terribly often, but boy oh boy, when I do, is it ever a handy thing to have in a wood shop. Now, again, like many other things in the shop, it is on wheels so that I can move it out, away from the wall to give myself in-feed and out-feed space depending on how long the material is that I'm running. Now, in terms of future episodes, future projects, right now this is sitting on the original stand that it came with. Now, that footprint is potentially prized space that could be used for storage if this thing was instead sitting on some kind of a cabinet that had shelves or drawers, what have you. So there's another potential future project, future episode here on He Said, She Said, but that probably won't happen until I run out of all the other nooks and crannies and storage space elsewhere in the shop. So with that, that brings us to the halfway point of the tour. Let's move on to the next corner. So one of the things that you'll notice about this area of the shop is there's a pretty severe contrast between some things that have seen some refinement and some things that are still quite primitive. Now one of the game-changing upgrades is the clamp rack that's hung up on the wall. There's a few other tools that are hanging up there as well. Previously my clamps and things were in a box on the floor or in another room because I didn't want them underfoot and I would bring them in when I needed them. So it's been wonderful to have that bit of organization and refinement added to this portion of the shop. Continuing on that theme of taking advantage of wall space for organization, I want to do a similar thing for all of my marking and measuring tools. And I think this spot here on the wall will do nicely for that station. That's going to be one of those projects that'll be fairly easy but really satisfying. So there's a future episode right there of adding that little upgrade and bit of refinement to this portion of the shop. Now the next thing that I want to draw your attention to is this wonderfully sophisticated piece of plywood sitting on top of some sawhorses. Now, while I love having all this surface area, it's not terribly sophisticated and nowhere near the end game of what I want to have in this footprint. So I've been thinking long and hard about what sort of functionality that I need here, and I've been doing some sketches, making some plans, and so far, here's what I've got. The short description is a torsion box top. The top will also have some bench dog holes in it, and the storage area beneath will be a combination of drawers and open cubby storage. Oh, and that wood vise that I mentioned earlier that's currently attached to my metal station, that will get transplanted over here and become part of this workstation. I've got some other creature features in mind as well for this thing, but that's the sneak peek. It's going to be a really fun build and I'm really excited about it. That'll be a fun episode. So the last thing in our field of view for now is the bandsaw. I've really been enjoying this bandsaw, but I didn't really care much for the fence system that it came with, and I've been tinkering with re-engineering it. It's definitely a work in progress. I haven't really documented any of that adventure on camera because frankly, I don't have much of a plan. I'm very much making it up as I go. So when I get to something that I actually like, I may give you a walkthrough of what I've done and the modifications that I've made. You can see that yet again, I'm putting to use some more of the aluminum extrusion material. Why? Because I have a bunch of it around. And boy, you know, it's just like Big Boy's erector set. You can do endless things with it. So you know that old phrase, once you buy a hammer, everything looks like a nail. I happen to have a fair amount of that aluminum extrusion material around, so I tend to find good uses for it. In terms of other projects that are centered on this workstation, I don't really have too much in mind. I know that I'm going to want a circle cutting jig. There's a couple of really great designs that I've seen out there that are shop built, and I'm looking forward to breaking ground on that project as well. Not sure how quickly that's going to bubble to the top of my priority list, but it's definitely one of those things that every self-respecting bandsaw workstation should have that I think I would get some definite use out of. Oops, there's actually one more thing I wanted to talk about before we leave this portion of the room. So this plastic thing screwed to the wall here that I hang my cordless drill from that looks like it came from the dollar store. This is about to get a big upgrade. I'm in desperate need of better organization for a bunch of my smaller handheld power tools. So an episode coming up in the very near future will be the replacement of this thing, and I think you're going to like it. So just as a little bit of a teaser, I'll be repurposing something that I found at Goodwill and augmenting it with PVC. I think it's going to be a really fun episode, so be sure to watch for that one coming up real soon. So before I talk about this last stop on the shop tour, I wanted to talk about the thing that we've been literally working around as we've been making our way through the shop, which is the miter station that sits right smack in the middle of everything, quite literally. Didn't really spend any time on it because we spent, 4 episodes talking about it during the build. So if you're interested in that miter station that you might have seen corners of as we've been panning around and working through the room, I'll put a link to that series of videos in the description box. Now, the first thing you'll notice about this corner of the room is there aren't any tools. And that's actually very intentional for a couple of reasons. The first reason is I knew that with all the real estate in this luxuriously huge shop that I've got, that I would have enough space for an area that served this kind of purpose, which, as you can see, primarily it's a writing desk. We'll talk more about the features of this little corner here in a minute, but there's a second reason. So you might recall from earlier in the tour, the heart of the dust collection system is going to be located in the corner of the room that's immediately opposite from where I'm sitting right now. So if you think about things in terms of the plumbing that needs to extend from that point to wrap around the room, once that plumbing gets to the far side of either one of these doorways, you'd have to do all kinds of stupid things to get past that doorway to plumb some tool that generates dust that sits here in this corner. So it was pretty practical and easier on me, frankly, just to stop the plumbing there and make sure that all of my dust generating tools were located anywhere in the shop except for this corner. So that leaves me with the good fortune of having a spot where I can take a load off with Renee or some other guest. I can make notes, refer to plans or sketches. I've got a shelf up here for some parts catalogs and some woodworking plan books. I've got instructions and warranty information for a bunch of my tools up here in this file box. The whiteboard has obvious uses. If I'm not going to go to pen and paper for something, I'm usually writing down measurements for something really quick that I don't want to forget. And that's typically what ends up here on the whiteboard. Sometimes I'm sketching or modeling something and talking to someone else about what it is that I'm trying to get out of my head and turn into a reality. So the cabinet here to my left has, a multitude of things. Personal protective equipment in the top, rags in the bottom, some cleaning supplies, latex gloves in case I'm doing something messy, and best of all, if I bring a drink out here, I'd like to put my drink in that cabinet so whatever I'm drinking doesn't get sawdust in it. And then I also keep an older tablet sitting out here in case I need to get online, maybe refer to a video, or go look something up without having to go all the way back inside. So that about wraps it up for our first ever woodshop tour. Thanks so much for coming along and letting me show you around. This video will be fun, I know for me anyway, to look back on a few years from now just to see how things have changed and how it's evolved. I'm feeling like it's pretty functional as is, but as you got the sense of as we were making our way around the room, I do have plans to add some creature features and make it just that much better. Thank you so much for joining us once again here on He Said, She Shed, and I hope we'll see you again next time.